Hi, and welcome to the Higher Self-Embodiment Podcast. My name is Desiree, and today we're going to talk about the prevalence of shame and guilt, ways that it often originates in our upbringing, and how we can take our power back. Shame and guilt can be pretty tricky to release at first because it can present in a number of ways that are habitual and normalized in our world. Some areas include where we don't think that we're enough or measure up, where we don't feel deserving, or where we think we might need to get it right or that we can't get it right, or where we're hard on ourselves or others. And I get it. What I'm describing right now is almost anybody who walks this planet. For me, guilt and shame present it by me being pretty hard on myself. For a long time, I approached tasks and opportunities from a place of fragmentation and functionality rather than pleasure and curiosity, thinking if I got it right, then I'd get XYZ. On a spiritual level, this looks something like if I did something right, it would open up to the manifestation of my next level of healing or something that I wanted. And if a lot of time passed before reaching what I wanted came to manifest, I would blame myself as if I wasn't doing enough. And on a more personal level, it often presented as if I do this, this person will approve of me. For a long time, I was vulnerable to others with opportunistic mentalities because of this, who played off of my guilt and shame for their own benefit. And this took a lot for me to untangle myself from and rise out of altogether. In other areas of my life, I found myself getting angry with others at times, blaming them for my upset and pushing them away. And when in reality, it was my own shaming inner dialogue that I was avoiding and instead projecting onto others by shaming them. Now I understand that it is through our self-acceptance and acceptance of others, our letting go, our play, and our lightness that we attract that which we desire. And it is the greatest way to know ourselves and our boundaries. It's a matter of slowing down and feeling rather than reacting. And it's valuing connection over the need to be right and having healthy communication and conflict resolution tools in place. The other day, I was driving down the road and a guy on a moped was on the edge, swerving between the lane that I was in and the shoulder. So not wanting to hit him, I drove a little slower behind instead of immediately passing him. Then he aggressively waved his arm at me to pass him as if I was doing something wrong. It was apparent to me that he was annoyed. And I knew this wasn't true for me because I had both his and my well-being at heart. So I quietly, in my own space, said to him, "That energy is not mine. I return it back to you and bless you on your way." And intuitively, I was able to see that he was actually experiencing shame in his circumstance. I sensed that he didn't like the attention he was drawing to himself and felt embarrassed or burdensome. But instead of feeling and releasing it, he chose to project it onto me by making it appear as though I was burdening him. So shame and guilt come when we receive as truth overt or underlying messages that our unique, natural, and intuitive way of living is wrong, inconvenient, or not practical. By nature, as humans, we are designed to be led by our heart, to be inspired and nudged, and to feel warnings in our gut when danger or misfortune is close by. So to feel our inner cues, we need to be grounded, and this means to feel safe and settled, and we need to be free to be ourselves without taking in the judgments, criticisms, or attacks that may come from others around us. As children, however, we're so vulnerable depending on our adult guardians and don't have strong enough lower chakras yet to discern and filter out those negative messages. This makes children easily shapeable and results in strongly ingrained generational trauma throughout our world. To be grounded, we need air, water, food, shelter, clothing, sleep. We need to feel safe. We need to feel love and belonging. We need to feel a sense of self and esteem. And we need creative outlets, personal growth, and a sense of purpose. As children, we experience some of those immediately while we build up to others, for example, sense of self and sense of purpose. In developing our sense of self and our sense of belonging as babies and children, there are a number of needs that we have that are grossly overlooked throughout our world as a result of familial, societal, and cultural conditioning. So as a result of the conditioning throughout our world, bonding between babies and their parents and surrounding adult guardians, as well as the support of the baby's natural rhythm, are severely interrupted, although it's been normalized, so it's not something easily recognizable by most people. This interruption results in a less intuitive and synergistic bond between baby and parents, as well as the baby not being well set up to sense and regulate their own energy later in life. All of this results in controlling parenting, where a lot of focus is placed on shaping the baby's rhythms to meet the parents' needs or the rhythms around them, such as daycare or school, as well as entertaining the baby rather than allowing them to naturally play alongside whatever task we are performing. So this is especially difficult because in most scenarios, we cannot bring our children to work in the ways that the indigenous mothers brought their children with them to complete the day's duties with other aunties nearby to support. As children get older, many families choose chores charts or behavior charts or rewards and punishments to gain the appearance of cooperation, but it actually lacks intrinsic motivation for the child. And this is where, as children, we learn to look outside of ourselves for what is right, wrong, or acceptable, and we lose touch with our deeper impulses, needs, wants, likes, and dislikes. Gauging ourselves by outer sources is how we come to believe that we can fail or win, or that we are enough or not enough, and this is where guilt and shame comes in. So what I'm about to share may seem a little off topic for some listeners, but my purpose of sharing it is to demonstrate how many of us were conditioned to lose touch with ourselves from the start of our lives, which set many of us up to look outside of ourselves for validation, sustenance, perceived love, and security. So in the first year or so that we are babies, we need to be in the arms of safe, loving adults nearly all of the time or lying beside them so that our nervous systems can entrain to theirs as a reference point so that we can regulate our nervous systems later on when we begin venturing out of the arms. This is usually when babies begin walking. But even at this point, they still need co-sleeping and frequent touch and check-ins, which they circle back around to us for in their own readiness throughout the day. In truth, by design, babies aren't meant to cry regularly like we see in civilized areas of the world. By nature, crying is actually an escalated state of stress that occurs after multiple subtle signs have been missed. When the bond between baby and mother are in a balanced and natural state, they are so close that the mother can actually sense the baby's needs before they ever even reach a state of crying. So the mother may notice the baby's facial expressions changing, hear little grunts and small noises, recognize gestures indicating discomfort. They can feel subtle waves of irritation. And these are all indicating the baby's need for support. And the mother may also experience sensations in her own body or her breasts that cue her to tend to the baby. So the baby isn't forced into a high-stress state of crying for its needs to be met. So there's actually scientific research that shows brain injury occurs to a baby's brain after 20 consecutive minutes of crying. Now, on another level, the repeated experience forms a habit in the baby, resulting in them responding late to their own inner cues later in life, which sometimes is to the point where they actually lose touch with their inner cues and their individual needs. In long times past, a number of Native American tribes preserved their newborn babies by keeping them home, only with their immediate family members for the first 1 to 2 months. They understood that this supported the baby in acclimating to life outside of the belly, integrating new smells, sounds, feelings, and even the taste of the mother's milk and their close family members' energy and the home environment. This set the child up to have a stronger sense of self, as well as a stronger sense of belonging with their family tribe. Another facet where shame and guilt is cultivated stems from early times when children are naturally helpful. Whatever the parents are doing, the children want to do too. So dad may be taking out the trash, the child wants to carry the corner of the bag to help. Mom may be washing the dishes, and the child wants to stand beside her and put their hands in the water and help. But in fast-paced cultures around the world, many parents have little patience for this, as it requires slowing down and cleaning up messes. So unfortunately, instead of recognizing the opportunity to encourage the child's interest to help and model the task so they eventually become refined enough to independently do it within a few short years, the child is often redirected to another activity, and eventually they stop trying to help and lose interest in being a contributing member to the home and family upkeep. So this often results in the child losing touch with a natural facet of their sense of belonging, and in later years, it often results in controlling parenting, where the child is asked to do chores and is often resistant, which can lead to power struggles and action without intrinsic motivation. All of this cultivates more shame and guilt in both the child and the parents. And as a result of children commonly having dysregulated nervous systems and being out of sync with their parents, the power struggles that ensue between the parents and children often lead to frustration in parents, which often results in the children taking on more shame. As children, many of us weren't given enough choices, we weren't given enough time to complete our sentences or ask all of our questions, and our no's often ignited frustration and anger amongst the adults around us. And of course, it's not to say that rules and boundaries aren't essential in our upbringing. They're just meant for safety and demonstration of self-care rather than the adult's convenience or to meet an adult guardian's likings. Also, how we are spoken to is key. Were the adults in our upbringing kind, patient, encouraging, or neutral? Or were they frustrated, fast, impatient, or critical with us? For those that haven't listened to it yet, in episode 5, I do talk about where this breakdown of the family model, amongst other imbalances in our world, ultimately stems from. In short, our mass consciousness was infiltrated with destructive beliefs that broke down the connection between our hearts and minds and transformed us from a heart-driven world to a mind-driven world. Ultimately, this resulted in oppression of the feminine energy, corruption, and widespread guilt and shame, which led to severe imbalances throughout the world. In our mind-driven world, the feminine energy does not receive the nurturance, reverence, or protection and preservation that it requires in order for us to thrive and live in effortless balance. All of the points that I shared earlier about the upbringing of babies and children are examples of how our feminine energy has been intercepted. As a result, it leaves most of us in a perpetual chase to keep up with life. Even those of us that consider ourselves to be financially and materially well endowed are often on a chase, still harboring a sense of scarcity within, which is just another way of saying that we're not enough, that we're not worthy of living emotionally or materially secure lives without striving and fighting for it. Many folks are out of touch with their soul's truest desires because they're on a wheel to make ends meet and to keep up with the societal expectations, and they've lost touch with their wholeness during the time that they were babies. Most don't even realize that they're dealing with unmet needs because we were born into these imbalances. And this has many of us looking outside of ourselves for love, validation, for our sustenance and our sense of belonging, which leave many of us fitting roles of takers and pleasers, victims and aggressors in varying degrees, of which can only exist when guilt and shame are present. Unfortunately, this is a primary way that adults have generally learned to cope with their guilt and shame, which doesn't actually release these feelings and the programs that anchor them into us. Shaming can be found in our words, but most often it's found in the subtle layers of our interactions between one another. So for example, the tone of voice, or a disappointed expression, or simply a person throwing their hands up in the air can say so much, right? It is up to us, however, if we wish to take that into our psyche as truth. It is our birthright to be happy and secure for no other reason than simply because it feels good. In truth, we are children of the universe, or God, or the divine, whatever it is that you wish to call it, and that is where our sustenance comes from. Truly, we can simply call out to the divine, say what we need, and trust and know that it is only a matter of time before it is manifest in this physical reality. And all we need to do is believe, celebrate it, be it, and take steps that nurture our dreams and desires, because our actions are our prayers. And these steps are not dutiful, but rather they're ways that we can prime the pump and show the universe how serious we are. So it's less about the outcome of our actions and more about our dedication to nurture our dreams and live our integrity, with pauses to feel and listen in between our steps, because this is a co-creative process between ourselves and the universe. So we take a step and the universe meets us each time. Still, oftentimes it's not this simple. This is only one facet. To truly feel empowered and overcome this in our day-to-day lives takes strong communication skills that help us speak up for ourselves and express our needs and feelings to others in a way that honors the differences between ourselves and others and does not put others on the defensive. So this creates true resolution, which can sometimes mend our relationships and sometimes provides the closure that's needed for each party to authentically be themselves. Personally, I have found Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg to be a very empowering tool that not only helps me communicate with others, but actually helps me get in touch with my own needs and feelings. So it's taken me a lot of practice because it's really important to me that I'm not just scripting my words, but actually feeling them and sharing a dynamic conversation with others when I'm expressing in this way. So NVC, or another form of heart-centered communication, feeling a sense of belonging within ourselves and having a sense of ourselves allows us to feel safe to allow others to show up as they see fit, to complete their sentences and to play out their choices that we honestly may sometimes utterly disagree with, and feel safe to know that we have the tools to respond truthfully and let the chips fall where they may. So this may disappoint others may walk away, or we may need to be the one who exits a relationship. But when we have a strong foundation within ourselves and strong communication skills, we can allow each person to come to the middle line as they see fit, without judgment and without clinging or the need to change the other, even if others want to change us. When we have these tools, we cut through the illusion of guilt and shame and return to our sovereignty. And when we do this, we give others around us permission to feel their shame and guilt and transform their lives into greater freedom as well. So getting comfortable with goodbyes is really important in this practice because everyone gets to choose their own path, and sometimes it's just not what aligns with us. And we must honor one another and understand that as souls, sometimes we play these difficult roles to help each other learn and grow. When we see it in this manner, this is when our pain becomes our sacred offering rather than our loss. And when we see it in this way, we attract more love and congruence into our lives as a result. Another practice that can be supportive in releasing guilt and shame is to slow ourselves down and recognize those moments where we may not like what another is saying to us and our impulse to quickly respond. Almost always, that quick impulse is an avoidance of our own guilt and shame by attempting to project it onto another. This is an opportunity to pause, breathe, remind ourselves that others have a right to their own perceptions of us, even if they are not applicable to our actual stories. And we can ask ourselves what belief is being triggered in us by another's expression. Simply, we always have the right to say that we don't agree and accept that another's views are different than ours. This makes no one wrong and nothing shameful, just different. But it does mean that we do have to feel our feelings during this, and that might not be comfortable. And to release our internal guilt and shame, we can let ourselves off the hook by not taking life too seriously and instead getting curious and seeing how life is happening for us instead of to us. So we're all here learning and growing, and pain is our growth. It's important that anytime a projection is made onto us, that we consciously disagree with it and lovingly return the energy back to the original sender. This can be in the form of a conversation, or if it's not safe or available, it can be a statement that's made to their higher selves. What's most important is that we're saying it and moving that energy out of our bodies. We can also work to reclaim our sense of self and our sense of belonging that we may have fallen out of touch with as children by strengthening our spiritual connection and asking for healing in these areas. We can also practice getting to know ourselves with curiosity by trying new things or returning to things that we loved previously, especially as children. And we can open ourselves to inner child work as well. So in episode 3, I share about my inner child practice that I created for myself, which rapidly transformed my life. So in summary, guilt and shame is the result of our bonding and autonomy having been interrupted by unhealthy conditioning that cemented unhealthy beliefs in us. Bonding as children is key to knowing ourselves. Knowing ourselves as adults is key to our ability to bond intimately. Knowing ourselves is key to knowing what we want. And knowing what we want frees us from becoming subject to the expectations around us, which frees us from guilt and shame. In short, knowing ourselves is our greatest protection. The more that we invest in getting to the core of who we truly are, the more easily we can see that guilt and shame is simply illusion and holds no actual weight or validity. Truly, we are all free by nature, and divine provision is always here for us. We never need to worry or search. Okay, so that wraps it up for today. Thank you so much for listening. And if you would like to submit any questions or topics that you'd like me to speak on, please feel free to message me in the text link below in the episode description, and we'll go from there. Much love and aloha.